Barring some catastrophe, Labour will be elected back into government in the UK for the first time since 2010, and with it will come some of the most draconian electric vehicle policies anywhere outside the madness of California. Not for Labour leaving energy decisions up to the market, no sir. With Labour we're going back to the 1970s, with good old-fashioned state control, promising to build chargers, gigafactories and the like with taxpayers' money, and its wildly expensive push to decarbonise the economy. Just ask Google how that net zero by 2030 thing is going for them. Spoiler, badly. Just as the world is starting to come to its senses on the madness of EV mandates, with major manufacturers almost universally pulling back from heady promises of electrification and demand for EVs dropping like a stone, Labour's policies will not only cost billions in taxpayer money, but will put the government and auto manufacturers on a collision course with the car-buying public. And we all know who will win that particular battle, don't we? Welcome back to MGUY, British engineer and lawyer, now Sydney-based YouTuber. Be sure to follow me on the usual socials for more content, links in the description, and please make sure you're subscribed and have enabled all notifications so you don't miss out on any future videos. In its automotive sector plan, Labour celebrates the British car industry right before tearing it to pieces. The UK's automotive sector is a jewel in our manufacturing crown. It has a long and proud history across the country, and its British footprint reflects the entire breadth of the sector, spanning cars, vans, buses, high performance, off-road and much more. But that's just typical Labour lies, because as the Telegraph reported last week, major car manufacturers are already looking to pull out of the UK rather than pay fines for not selling enough electric cars. It's easier just to not bother trying. Why Labour's petrol car ban risks devastating Britain's auto industry. Vauxhall threatens to kickstart a UK exodus as Starmer reveals his net zero ambitions. Sir Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff, Sue Gray, is said to keep a list of potential crises that a Labour government may face if the party wins power next week, which it has. Now the former civil servant may be wearily adding another, the closure of 2 major UK car factories. The threat issued by Stellantis, the automotive giant behind Vauxhall, Citroën and Peugeot, will be an early test of resolve for a government under Starmer, who currently looks set for a thumping victory on July 4th. Labour has trumpeted its green credentials repeatedly on the campaign trail, with its manifesto promising to make Britain a clean energy superpower, whatever that is. That includes plans to toughen up the UK approach to electric vehicles by bringing forward a ban on the sale of new petrol cars from 2035 to 2030, undoing a delay announced by Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives. Yet it is hard to square that goal with the demands now being made by Stellantis, which is demanding a partial relaxation of the rules. In the crosshairs are the company's plants at Ellesmere Port in Cheshire and Luton, which make passenger cars and vans and collectively employ hundreds of people. On Tuesday, at an industry conference in London, the UK Managing Director of Stellantis, Maria Grazia Davino, blamed new laws forcing car makers to sell ever greater proportions of electric cars. Under the so-called zero-emission vehicle ZEV mandate, 22% of cars sold by big manufacturers must be electric from this year. The target then ratchets up annually until it reaches 80% in 2030, before a total ban on new petrol and diesel cars 5 years later. Those that miss the targets face fines of £15,000 for every petrol car they sell outside their allotted quota. However, against an electric car sales slowdown across global markets, Davino argues that the mandate's targets now look impossible to meet. Electric vehicles only managed to capture a 16% market share in the first 5 months of 2024, according to the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, SMMT. The fact is that the demand is not there, following the glide path designed by the government, Davino told journalists. It means Stellantis cannot meet the targets unless it discounts so heavily that it slips into a loss, or restricts sales of petrol cars to artificially push up the percentage of electric sales, she argued. We can survive because we are fit for every circumstance, Davino added, but in the UK there will be consequences for sure on the production setup. Stellantis UK does not stop. Stellantis production in the UK could stop. What a great start for the shiny new Labour Prime Minister as car factories close with thousands of jobs lost. But then again, do you think he really cares? Climate action trumps everything, don't forget. So too bad for those who are now unemployed. They're just stuck in the past, right? You can be sure that when the UK MD of a huge brand like Stellantis makes this kind of warning, it's not empty words. And as we've mentioned before, naturally, it's going to reverse the very welcome delay to the petrol and diesel car ban and bring it back to 2030 because certainty. Labour knows that business needs certainty and stability from government policy, and we would guarantee this for the UK automotive sector. We believe that the 2030 deadline is the right policy which industry was confident of hitting. Yeah, right. Pushing back the date of the phase-out will raise costs for British families by billions of pounds because electric vehicles have cheaper lifetime costs than petrol cars. And by 2030 are expected to have lower upfront costs. This is simply not true. At the moment, EVs are being turned over far faster than the equivalent petrol or diesel car, and to claim that they are cheaper when you're having to replace one every couple of years due to catastrophic depreciation is just nonsense. And when they say certainty, they mean locking it in so there's no opportunity for the market to find a better solution, hence keeping their renewables mates happy. But Labour's not going to reconsider this plan just because a bunch of Luddites and technophobes don't like it. They just believe that all it needs are more charging stations and that will solve the EV uptake problem. It will throw billions of dollars at battery factories and will set binding targets for charging points, again, mandating a course of action that clashes with public demand, all in the name of climate. We recognise the frustration from industry about how the government has administrated charge point funding. Labour will release and redirect existing charge point funding to ensure there is reliable charging coverage wherever you are in the UK. That includes the unreleased £950 million rapid charging fund announced more than 3 years ago in March 2020. Labour would release funding as soon as possible and prioritise bids from areas where the market isn't delivering a reliable network. This will give consumers confidence by helping to address huge regional disparity in access to charging infrastructure and plugging, get it, gaps in the network. Well, I can guarantee these investments will end up as white elephants. There's no money to be made from commercial charging, the margins are just too small, and the investment would be far better used elsewhere. You didn't have to bribe the fuel companies to build petrol stations because the economics of internal combustion cars makes sense. On the other hand, nothing about the economics of electric cars makes sense. But sadly, after the likely disastrous result from the Conservatives, the UK can look forward to the extreme left environmental policies of Keir Starmer's Labour Party for a generation to come. All I can say is that I'm glad I now live in Australia. At least we may be spared this madness for a few more years.